As the days passed, Zainab found herself walking on eggshells around Ode. He had become more controlling, more demanding, and quick to anger. He monitored her every move, questioning her if she took too long at the market or if she spoke to anyone he didn't approve of. The atmosphere in their home became tense and suffocating, and Zainab felt like a prisoner in her own home. One afternoon, Zainab returned home late from the market. It had been raining heavily, and she had struggled to find a cab. By the time she finally arrived home, she was drenched and exhausted. As she walked through the door, she found Ode waiting for her, his face twisted in anger. "Where have you been, Zainab?" he demanded, his voice filled with suspicion. "Who were you with?" Zainab's heart raced, and she tried to explain. "Ode, it was raining, and I couldn't find a cab. That's why I'm late." But before she could say another word, Ade's hand shot out, slapping her across the face. The force of the blow sent her reeling, and she stumbled backward, her cheek burning with pain. "Liar!" Ode shouted, his eyes blazing with fury. "You were with another man, weren't you? Don't think I don't know what you're up to." Zainab stared at him in shock, tears streaming down her face. "No, Ode, I swear I wasn't. I was just trying to get home. Please, you have to believe me." But Ode didn't listen. He grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her violently. "You think you can deceive me? You think I'm a fool like your ex-fiancé, Kwami? You're mine, Zainab, and you'll do as I say. Don't ever think of playing games with me, or else you'll regret it." He pushed her to the ground, and Zainab felt a sharp sting of pain as her head hit the floor. She called up, shielding herself from his blows, her mind spinning with fear and disbelief. This wasn't the life she had imagined. This wasn't the man she had thought she married. When Ode finally stopped, he stood over her, breathing heavily. "Don't you ever defy me again," he yelled at her before storming out of the room. Zainab lay on the floor, crying and trembling with pain and fear. She had never felt so alone, so utterly trapped. She knew she couldn't stay in this marriage, but she didn't know how to escape. The man she had once thought would provide her with a better life had become her worst nightmare. In the days that followed, Zainab's bruises faded, but the fear lingered. She became more withdrawn, more cautious around Ode, trying to avoid anything that might make him angry. But the tension in their home only grew worse, and she knew that it was only a matter of time before the next outburst. Then, one morning, Zainab discovered that she was pregnant again. The news should have been joyful, but instead, it filled her with fear and worry. How could she bring another child into this marriage? How could she protect herself and her children from Ade's increasing temper and violence? Desperate and scared, Zainab decided to confide in her mother. She made the journey to her childhood home, her heart heavy with worry. When she arrived, Amina welcomed her with open arms, but she could see the distress in her daughter's eyes. "Zainab, what's wrong?" Amina asked, leading her into the living room. Zainab hesitated, her emotions overwhelming her. But she knew she couldn't keep this to herself any longer. "Mama, things aren't good with Ode. He has changed. He's controlling, angry, he's violent. He beats me, Mama, and now I'm pregnant again." Amina's heart sank as she listened to her daughter's words. She had feared that this might happen, but hearing it confirmed was like a knife to her chest. "Oh, my child. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. I wish I had known sooner. Why didn't you say anything?" Zainab broke down in tears, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Mama, I don't know what to do. He's not the man I thought he was. He hits me, and I'm scared. I feel so trapped. He warned me not to say anything to anyone. Please don't say anything, I don't want him to be upset with me, please." Amina pulled her daughter into a comforting embrace, her own tears falling as she tried to soothe her. "Oh my God, Zainab, you have to be strong for your children. You can't let him break you. We'll figure out a way forward together, but you must be careful. You have to protect yourself and your children. You know you're pregnant, please, take it easy." Zainab nodded through her tears. But deep down, she knew that escaping this situation would be anything but easy. She was so scared of what Ode might do if he found out she had spoken with her mother, and she worried about how much longer she could endure his abuse. Meanwhile, as Zainab struggled with her horrible marriage, Kwami was trying to rebuild his life after the heartbreak of losing her. It had been a year since Zainab had left him, and the pain still lingered like an open wound. But Kwami was determined to move on, to focus on his business and find a way to heal. Kwami had thrown himself into his work, expanding his business and making a name for himself in the town. But no matter how much success he achieved, the memory of Zainab continued to haunt him. He couldn't shake the feeling that his love and sacrifice hadn't been enough. One evening, Kwami's good friend Yemi stopped by his shop to check on him. Yemi had been by Kwami's side throughout the entire ordeal, offering support and encouragement when Kwami needed it most. "Kwami," Yemi said as he walked into the shop, "you've been working non-stop. How are you holding up?" Kwami forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm doing my best, Yemi. Just trying to keep busy, you know." Yemi nodded, understanding the pain his friend was still carrying. "I know it's been tough, but you have to move on, Kwami. It's been more than a year since you and Zainab ended things. You're a good man, and there's a bright future ahead of you. Don't let what happened with Zainab define you. My friend, you have to move on and find a good woman to marry. I know you're hurt, but you deserve better than a woman like Zainab. I believe you should thank God you didn't end up with her. Imagine having an unfaithful woman like that as your wife." Kwami sighed, leaning against the counter. "It's hard, Yemi. I gave her everything, and now it feels like I'm starting from scratch. But you're right, I have to keep going. I can't let this destroy me." Yemi placed a comforting hand on Kwami's shoulder, his expression filled with empathy. "Kwami, you've been through a lot, but you're stronger than you think. Sometimes, life throws us curveballs, and all we can do is pick ourselves up and keep moving forward. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and you're building something great here. Trust me, the right woman for you will come, my friend. Don't let the past hold you back." Kwami nodded, appreciating his friend's words. "Thanks, Yemi. I'm trying. It's just hard to let go of the dreams I had, you know. But I believe you're right, I need to focus on what's ahead, not what's behind me." Yemi smiled, giving Kwami's shoulder a gentle squeeze before letting go. "That's the spirit. Go out and find your wife, it's time." Kwami managed a small smile in return, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in a while. "I appreciate that, Yemi. Truly." As Yemi left the shop, Kwami turned his attention back to his work, determined to take his friend's advice to heart. He knew it would be a long road to fully healing, but he was willing to put in the effort. Meanwhile, back at home, Zainab's situation was becoming increasingly unbearable. The once hopeful future she had envisioned with Professor Ode had turned into a living nightmare. His anger and jealousy seemed to know no bounds, and Zenab lived in constant fear of his volatile temper. Days turned into weeks, and each one felt heavier than the last. Zainab was scared of telling Ode about the pregnancy, because instead of the joy she was supposed to feel at the thought of bringing another child into the world, she was filled with fear. She knew that the news would only serve as another reason for Ode to tighten his control over her. She just didn't know what to do, and wanted to delay the news as long as she could. One evening, after yet another argument over a small issue, Ode stormed out of the house, leaving Zainab alone in the living room, shaking with fear. She didn't know how much longer she could endure this. The physical abuse was bad enough, but the emotional torment was even worse. She felt like a shadow of her former self, trapped in a life she no longer recognized. Desperate for a way out, Zainab began to contemplate the unthinkable. She wondered if she could leave Ode, if there was any way she could escape his grasp and start over. But every time she thought about it, she was consumed by fear. Where would she go? How would she take care of 2 children on her own? And what would Ode do if he found her? Zainab's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door slamming shut. She flinched, knowing that Ode had returned. She quickly wiped away her tears and tried to steady her breathing, bracing herself for whatever was to come next. Ode walked into the living room, his expression dark and brooding. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at her with a look that made her skin crawl. Zainab felt her heart race, her palms sweating as she waited for him to speak. "What were you thinking about just now, Zainab?" Ode asked, his voice low and menacing. Zainab shook her head, trying to keep her voice steady. "Nothing, Ode. I was just sitting here." Ode narrowed his eyes, taking a step closer to her. "Don't lie to me, Zainab. I can see it in your eyes. You were thinking about leaving me, weren't you?" Zainab's breath caught in her throat. How had he known? "No, Ode, I wasn't, I would never." But before she could finish her sentence, Ode grabbed her by the arm, yanking her to her feet. "Don't you dare lie to me, Zainab," he shouted, his face inches from hers. "You belong to me, do you hear me? You're not going anywhere." Zainab winced as his grip tightened, the pain shooting through her arm. "Ade, please," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "I wasn't thinking that. I promise." Ade stared at her for a long moment, his eyes cold and calculating. Then, without another word, he shoved her back down onto the couch, turning away from her in disgust. Zainab's heart pounded in her chest as she watched him walk out of the room, the tears she had been holding back finally spilling over. She knew she couldn't stay in this marriage much longer. It was only a matter of time before Ade's anger escalated to something even more dangerous. Kwami stood in one of his huge electronic appliance shops in the market, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Business had been good lately, and he could feel the weight of the past slowly lifting from his shoulders. After everything that had happened with Zainab, he had thrown himself into his work, determined to build something solid, something that would last. As he stood, a customer walked in. Kwami turned around and the sight that met his eyes stopped him in his tracks. Standing in the doorway was a very beautiful young lady, a lady he hadn't seen in years, Quesa, Zainab's former roommate and friend from university. "Quesa." Kwami's voice was filled with surprise as he quickly walked over to her. "Is that really you?" Quesa's face lit up with a smile as she recognized him. "Kwami. It's so good to see you. I didn't expect to run into you here. How long has it been?" Kwami returned her smile, genuinely pleased to see her. "The feeling is mutual. It's been such a long time. How have you been?" "I've been well," Quesa replied, her eyes sparkling. "A lot has changed since university, but I've been keeping busy. What about you? How's everything going with you?" Kwami gestured for her to follow him as he walked toward the office at the back of the shop, where there was a small sitting area. "I've been doing well too, just focusing on my business. Things have really picked up recently." Quesa sat down, taking in the warm, inviting atmosphere of the shop. "It shows. Your shop is beautiful, Kwami. I'm impressed with what you've built here." "Thank you," Kwami said, a touch of pride in his voice. "It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. And what about you? I've heard you've been doing well, too. Something about writing books." Quesa laughed softly, a hint of modesty in her tone. "Yes, I've written a couple of novels. They've been well received, and it's been an amazing journey so far." I'm really grateful for how things have turned out. Kwami's eyes widened in admiration. That's incredible, Quesa. I'm really happy for you. You've always had a way with words, even back when you were in university. Quesa smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes as she thought back to those days. Thank you, Kwami. I've been lucky to be able to pursue my passion. But I have to say, I'm really sorry for what happened between you and Zainab. I know it must have been difficult. Kwami's smile faded slightly, but he quickly recovered, shaking his head. It's in the past now, Quesa. I've made peace with it. I've learned a lot since then, and I've tried to focus on the positive things in my life. Quesa reached out and gently touched his arm, her expression sincere. I'm glad to hear that, Kwami. You deserve happiness. I know how much you cared for her. Kwami nodded, appreciating her words. Thank you, Quesa. It means a lot. Let's not dwell on the past, though. It's good to see you again. We should catch up more often. Quesa's smile returned, and she nodded in agreement. I'd like that. We should definitely stay in touch. They exchanged contact information, and as Quesa left the shop, Kwami felt a sense of warmth and comfort. It was nice to reconnect with someone from his past, especially someone as kind and genuine as Quesa. Little did he know that this unexpected encounter would soon blossom into something much more. Over the next few months, Quesa and Kwami's friendship grew stronger. They began meeting up regularly, sharing meals, attending events, and supporting each other in their respective endeavors. Quesa often visited Kwami's shop, offering suggestions and ideas that helped him grow his business even further. Kwami, in turn, was a source of encouragement and inspiration for Quesa as she worked on her third novel. One afternoon, as they sat in a cafe discussing Quesa's latest book, Kwami couldn't help but admire how far she had come. You're quite the novelist now, Quesa. I'm impressed by how much you've accomplished. Quesa blushed slightly, her smile genuine. Thank you, Kwami. But I couldn't have done it without the support of friends like you. You've always believed in me, even back when I wasn't sure if I could make it. Kwami chuckled, shaking his head. You give me too much credit. You've always had the talent, Quesa. I just knew you would make it. They shared a laugh, but as the conversation continued, Kwami found himself drawn to Quesa in a way he hadn't expected. She was intelligent, kind, and had a sense of humor that always brightened his day. The more time they spent together, the more he realized how much he enjoyed her company and how much he cared for her. Quesa, too, found herself feeling something deeper for Kwami. She admired his resilience, his dedication to his work, and his gentle, caring nature. He was the kind of man she had always hoped to find, and as their friendship deepened, so did her feelings for him. One evening, as they were having dinner at a really nice restaurant, Kwami turned to Quesa, his heart pounding with nervous anticipation. Quesa, there's something I've been meaning to tell you, something that's been on my mind for a while now. Quesa looked up at him curious. What is it, Kwami? Kwami took a deep breath, gathering his courage. Quesa, I never thought I'd find love again after everything that happened, but you've brought joy back into my life. You've become so important to me, and I've realized that I don't want to imagine my life without you. Will you marry me? Quesa's eyes widened in surprise, her heart swelling with emotion. She hadn't expected this, but as she looked into Kwami's eyes, she knew without a doubt that this was what she wanted to. A bright smile spread across her face as she nodded eagerly. Yes, Kwami. 1,000 times yes. Kwami's face lit up with relief and joy as he pulled her into a tight embrace. You've made me the happiest man in the world, Quesa. And you've made me the happiest woman, Quesa whispered, her voice filled with love. With their engagement official, Quesa introduced Kwami to her parents, who were overjoyed by the news. Her father, a successful businessman himself, was especially impressed by Kwami's hard work. He could see that his daughter had chosen well, and he and his wife were more than happy to give their blessings for the marriage. At a dinner with Quesa's parents, her father, Mr. Ajayi, smiled warmly at Kwami as they discussed the wedding plans. "Kwami, I must say, I'm impressed with what you've accomplished. You've built a successful business from the ground up, and it's clear that you're a man of character. We are proud to welcome you into our family." Kwami, humbled by the praise, nodded respectfully. "Thank you, sir. It means a lot to me to have your support. I promise to always take care of Quesa and make her happiness my priority." Quesa's mother, Mrs. Ajayi, beamed at them both. "You two make a wonderful couple. We couldn't be happier for you." Quesa squeezed Kwami's hand under the table, her heart full of love and gratitude. "I'm so lucky to have found you, Kwami. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you." Kwami smiled back at her, his eyes filled with affection. "And I'm lucky to have found you, Quesa. You've brought light into my life when I needed it most." With the blessings of their families, Quesa and Kwami threw themselves into the wedding preparations. The excitement was everywhere, and the plans were big yet meaningful, reflecting the deep love and commitment they shared. The days leading up to the wedding were filled with joy, laughter, and anticipation. While Kwami and Quesa's love story was unfolding with happiness, elsewhere, Zainab's life was unraveling. She had been struggling in her marriage with Ode, and the once promising future she had envisioned had turned into a nightmare. The tension in her home was suffocating, and Ade's increasing jealousy and controlling behavior made her feel like a prisoner. One day, feeling overwhelmed and desperate for some comfort, Zainab decided to visit her mother, Amina. She needed to talk to someone, to share the burden she had been carrying for so long. When she arrived at her mother's house, Amina welcomed her with open arms, sensing the distress in her daughter's eyes. "Zainab, my dear, what's wrong?" Amina asked, leading her into the living room. Zainab hesitated, her emotions swirling inside her. "Mama, things have been so difficult with Ode. He's changed. He's angry all the time, and I feel so trapped. I don't know what to do." Mina's heart ached for her daughter as she listened to Zainab's words. She had feared something like this might happen, but hearing it confirmed was still a painful blow. Amina reached out, taking Zainab's hands in hers, offering whatever comfort she could. "My dear, I'm so sorry you're going through this," Amina said softly, her voice full of concern. "I've been worried about you. You know you can always come to me, no matter what." Zainab nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Mama, I feel so lost. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I'm not sure of anything anymore. Ade is so different from the man I thought I was marrying. He's controlling, angry, and I don't know how to make him happy." Amina sighed deeply, her brow furrowed with worry. She had watched her daughter make choices that she knew would lead to heartbreak, but she had hoped that Zainab would find a way to make her marriage work. Now, it seemed that hope was fading. As Amina searched for the right words to comfort her daughter, she remembered a piece of news she had heard recently. It wasn't something she had planned to share with Zainab, but now, it seemed like the right time. "Zainab," Amina began hesitantly, "there's something I need to tell you. I don't know if it will help, but you deserve to know. Kwami, he's getting married." Zainab's head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock. "Kwami? Getting married? To who?" Amina hesitated, watching the emotions flicker across Zainab's face, surprise, confusion, and something deeper, something that looked like regret. "He's marrying Quesa, your old friend from university." The words hit Zenab like a punch to the gut. Quesa, her old friend. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected Kwami to move on so quickly, to find happiness with someone else, someone she had known, someone she had trusted. The realization of what she had lost, of the man she had let go, crashed over her like a wave, leaving her feeling empty and hollow inside. Quesa, Zainab whispered, her voice trembling. I never thought. I never imagined. Amina squeezed her daughter's hands, trying to offer support as Zainab processed the news. Zainab, I know this is hard to hear, but life moves on. Kwami has found happiness with someone who appreciates him, and you need to focus on your own life now. Zainab shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mama, what have I done? I let go of a man who truly loved me, who cared for me. And now he's with someone else, and I'm stuck in this nightmare. Amina's heart broke for her daughter, but she knew there was nothing she could do to change the past. All she could do was help Zainab find a way to move forward. Zainab, you can't change what's happened. But you can learn from it. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. But that doesn't mean you can't find a way to make your life better. Zainab wiped her tears, her mind racing with a mix of emotions, regret, guilt, sadness, and a deep sense of loss. She had chosen Ode over Kwami, believing that she was making the right decision, that she was choosing a life of status and success. But now, as she looked at the reality of her situation, she realized how wrong she had been. Zainab stayed with her mother for the rest of the day, seeking comfort and solace. Amina did her best to console her, but she knew that Zainab's pain was something she would have to walk through on her own. The road ahead would be difficult, but Amina hoped that her daughter would find the strength to face it. As the evening approached, Zainab knew she had to return to her own home, to face the reality of her life with Ode. The thought filled her with dread, but she knew there was no escaping it. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. Before she left, Amina embraced her tightly, whispering words of encouragement. Zainab, you're stronger than you think. You've made mistakes, but that doesn't mean you can't find a way to move forward. Don't give up on yourself. Zainab nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude for her mother's unwavering support. Thank you, Mama. I don't know what I'd do without you. As Zainab walked back to her home, the weight of the news about Kwami and Quesa's engagement hung heavily on her heart. She couldn't stop thinking about what could have been, about the life she had lost when she chose to marry Ode. The regret gnawed at her, and the realization that Kwami had moved on while she was trapped in a miserable marriage filled her with a deep sense of sorrow. When she arrived home, she found Ode in the living room, sitting in his usual spot, reading a newspaper. He glanced up as she walked in, his expression unreadable. Zainab hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say, but she knew that nothing she could say would change the situation she was in. Where have you been? Ode asked, his voice cold and demanding. Zainab swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. I was visiting my mother. I needed to talk to her. Ade's eyes narrowed, and he set the newspaper aside, his tone growing sharper. You didn't tell me you were going to see her. I don't like it when you go out without informing me first. Zainab felt a surge of frustration and sadness. She was tired of living in fear, tired of being controlled. But she knew that confronting Ode would only lead to more conflict, more pain. I'm sorry, Ode, she said quietly, her voice laced with exhaustion. I'll let you know next time. Ode stared at her for a long moment before nodding curtly. See that you do? Zainab turned and walked towards their bedroom, feeling the walls of her life closing in around her. She knew that she couldn't go on like this, but she didn't know how to break free. The realization of what she had lost, Kwami's love, her own sense of self, her happiness, was almost too much to bear. As she lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, Zainab couldn't stop thinking about Kwami and Quesa. The thought of them together, happy and in love, filled her with a deep, aching sorrow. She had let go of a man who had truly cared for her, and now he was with someone else, someone who appreciated him in a way that she hadn't. Zainab closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. She knew that she had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. But the pain of her choices, the regret of what could have been, would haunt her for a long time to come. Meanwhile, as Zainab grappled with her regrets, Kwami and Quesa's love story continued to blossom. Their wedding preparations were in full swing, and both families were deeply involved in making sure the day would be a perfect celebration of their union. Kwami felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that he hadn't known in years. Being with Quesa had brought light back into his life, and the thought of building a future with her filled him with joy. He knew that they were right for each other, that their love was based on mutual respect, understanding, and a deep connection. As the wedding day approached, Kwami and Quesa's excitement grew. The ceremony was planned to be a beautiful blend of tradition and modernity, reflecting both their cultural heritage and their personal taste. Friends and family gathered from near and far, all eager to witness the union of two people who were clearly meant to be together. On the day of the wedding, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The venue was adorned with flowers and decorations, the air filled with the sweet scent of celebration. As Quesa walked down the aisle, radiant in her traditional attire, Kwami felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. She was the woman he had been waiting for, the partner who would stand by his side through whatever life brought their way. As they exchanged their vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for the rest of their lives, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The love between Kwami and Quesa was palpable, and everyone who witnessed their union knew that it was something special, something enduring. After the ceremony, the celebration continued with music, dancing, and feasting. Kwami and Quesa were surrounded by the warmth and love of their families and friends, their hearts full of joy and contentment. The future stretched out before them, filled with endless possibilities, and they were ready to face it together. Back at her home, Zainab sat alone in the dark, the sounds of the night filling the silence around her. The news of Kwami's wedding had reached her through the grapevine, and she couldn't help but imagine what the day had been like. She pictured Kwami and Quesa, smiling and happy, surrounded by people who loved them, and the thought tore at her heart. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. But the pain of what she had lost was a constant, gnawing presence in Zainab's heart, one that seemed to grow with each passing day. The image of Kwami and Quesa's wedding haunted her, a vivid reminder of the happiness she had let slip through her fingers. As Zainab sat alone in the dimly lit room, the weight of her regrets pressed down on her, almost suffocating in its intensity. She had traded the genuine love and respect Kwami had offered her for a life that had turned out to be a nightmare. The reality of her marriage to Ode was nothing like the dream she had envisioned when she chose him over Kwami. Instead of the security and status she had imagined, she found herself trapped in a cycle of fear and control, with little hope of escape. The silence of the house was oppressive, broken only by the occasional sound of Ode moving about in the other room. Zainab knew she should go to bed, but she couldn't bring herself to face him, to face the reality of her life. Instead, she sat there, wrapped in her thoughts, her heart heavy with sorrow. As she stared into the darkness, memories of the past flooded her mind, memories of her time with Kwami. She remembered the way he used to look at her, with eyes full of love and admiration. She remembered the gentle way he spoke to her, always kind, always patient. He had been everything she could have wanted in a partner, but she hadn't realized it until it was too late. Now, Kwami was married to Quesa, and they were building a life together, a life that could have been hers if only she had chosen differently. The thought filled her with a deep, aching regret, one that seemed to settle in her very bones. How could she have been so blind? How could she have thrown away something so precious? Zainab closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks as she whispered into the darkness, "I'm so sorry, Kwami. I'm so sorry." But her apologies were in vain, carried away by the night, unheard by the man who had once loved her so deeply. The man she had lost. While Kwami and Quesa's life was blossoming, Zainab's world continued to crumble. The news of Kwami's marriage to Quesa weighed heavily on her, a constant reminder of what she had lost. Her marriage to Ode had become even more strained, and the tension in their home was unbearable. Ade's jealousy and controlling behavior had only intensified since Zainab's last visit to her mother. He seemed to sense her growing unhappiness, and his response was to tighten his grip on her even further. He questioned her every move, scrutinized her interactions with others, and became increasingly paranoid that she was planning to leave him. One evening, after a particularly tense argument, Zainab found herself alone in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she tried to calm herself down. The argument had been over something trivial, or they had accused her of being too friendly with a neighbor, but the way he had looked at her, the cold, calculating expression in his eyes, had terrified her. She knew she couldn't go on like this, but the thought of leaving Ode filled her with fear. He had made it clear that he wouldn't let her go easily, and she was afraid of what he might do if she tried to leave. But the alternative, staying in a marriage that was slowly destroying her, seemed just as unbearable. As she stood there, her mind racing with thoughts of escape, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Ode standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "What are you thinking about, Zainab?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Zainab swallowed, trying to steady her voice. "Nothing, Ode. I was just thinking about dinner." Ade's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer to her. "Don't lie to me, Zainab. I can see it in your eyes. You're planning something, aren't you? You're thinking about leaving me." Zainab's heart raced, and she shook her head quickly. "No, Ode, I swear I'm not. I'm not going anywhere." But Ode didn't believe her. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight and painful. "You think you can fool me? You think you can just walk out on me after everything I've done for you? You're mine, Zainab, and you'll stay here whether you like it or not." Zainab winced at the pain in her arm, but she didn't dare resist. She knew that doing so would only make things worse. "Ode, please. I'm not leaving. I promise." Ode stared at her for a long moment before finally letting go of her arm. "See that you don't," he said coldly before turning and walking out of the kitchen. Zainab slumped against the counter, her whole body trembling. She knew she couldn't stay with Ode much longer. The situation was becoming increasingly dangerous, and she feared for her safety. But the thought of leaving, or finding a way out, seemed impossible. She needed help, but she didn't know where to turn. Her mother had been supportive, but Zainab knew that involving her in this situation could put her at risk as well. She didn't want to drag anyone else into the nightmare her life had become. But she also knew that if she didn't do something soon, she might not survive this marriage. Days turned into weeks, and Zainab's situation grew more desperate. She tried to avoid any confrontations with Ode, but it seemed that no matter what she did, he found a reason to lash out at her. The abuse, both physical and emotional, was taking a toll on her, and she felt like she was losing herself, piece by piece. One night, after yet another violent outburst from Ode, Zainab made a decision. She couldn't stay with him any longer. She had to leave, no matter how dangerous it was. She had to find a way to escape, for her own sake and for the sake of her children. She waited until Ode had fallen asleep before quietly packing a small bag with a few essentials. She knew she couldn't take much, just enough to get by until she could figure out her next steps. With her heart pounding in her chest, she crept out of the house, careful not to make a sound. As she stepped out into the cool night air, Zainab felt a surge of fear and adrenaline. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she had to keep moving. She couldn't go back, not now, not ever. She walked quickly, her mind racing with thoughts of what she would do next. She needed a safe place to stay, somewhere Ode wouldn't find her. She thought about going to her mother's house, but she knew that was too risky. Ade would look for her there first. Instead, she decided to go to a shelter, a place where she could find refuge and start planning her next steps. She had heard about a women's shelter in the area, a place where women in her situation could find safety and support. It wasn't an easy decision, but Zainab knew it was the only one she had left. She couldn't keep living in fear, couldn't keep enduring the abuse. She had to take control of her life, even if it meant starting over from scratch. As she walked through the quiet streets, her heart heavy with a mix of fear and determination, Zainab couldn't help but think about Kwami and Quesa. She wondered if they were happy, if their life together was everything she had once hoped for herself.